Talk to us a little bit about diversification here before we finish things up.
Yeah, diversification. So really quick, one of the things with stocks, because that's typically one of the first things people refer to is stocks. Again, like I was saying, stocks are incredibly monetized. This chart here, what we're looking at is the S&P 500 versus the total assets of the Fed, ECB, Bank of Japan, and People's Bank of China in dollars. What we see is a clear correlation that as the balance sheet of the central banks increases, we also see a direct correlation with the S&P 500. Again, if you can predict what these issuers of currency or to what degree they're going to manipulate the ledger, then you can pretty much predict anything, including the stock market. And to the bottom right, you see pricing stocks in terms of gold, and you see the world's becoming more volatile. Again, since 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve, are becoming more and more cyclical and boom and bust cycles. These things are becoming incredibly clear. And one of the more offensive ideas to people, again, to really hit it home for the average person, because the average person listening probably owns quite a bit of stocks. But one of the problems with stocks is that they're actually not going up in value in terms versus the political currency units that you're denominating them within. If we look at the top chart here in this green line, we think we have exponential growth in stocks and that stocks only go up and yada, yada, yada. But in reality, stocks have been virtually flat for half a century. They declined quite a bit in the 1970s as gold had a major rally, value transitioned out of stocks back into gold. And then we had the major dot-com bubble where everything was exploded. And then we've been pretty much flat since that crash. And people don't really understand this because, well, my stocks go up in price and I feel richer. And it's like, well, yes, because technology has made everything cheaper. Your stocks are doing nothing but keeping pace with the expansion of the ledger that you're denominating those stocks within. Again, when the money is a lie, the true value of your stocks that the stocks are trying to communicate to you, it is a lie. It doesn't make any sense. And you inherently then believe that the stocks are going up in value and everything else is keeping the same price. When in reality, it's like, no, the stocks are keeping the same value and technology is forcing the prices of everything else down. And the point here again comes back to monetary premium. If you compare the United States stock market in blue here versus the rest of the world, the United States clearly has a monetary premium because, again, if you're going to store monetary energy, why would you choose the second best stock market when you can just choose the United States stock market? And so when it comes to diversification and thinking about this, if I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, one of the main ideas, and I love this graphic so much, one of my favorite Twitter folks out there, what you see here is that, again, for the first time, we have this ship that with a hole with no open flaws in the system. And so we have a consistent store of value, a consistent measure of global wealth. And if you stop thinking of the world in terms of corrupted political currency units, and you instead begin thinking of the world in terms of fixed, immutable electric energy units within a closed, finite system, what you begin to see is that the relative value of every other system in the world continues to decline. Again, to use the oxygen versus Mona Lisa metaphor, it doesn't matter how valuable oxygen is to your survival. If it's an open system with an infinite supply, its relative price compared to the finite closed system of the Mona Lisa has to go down. The relative value has to go down. And so you asked about diversification. If we look at this here, it pretty much doesn't matter what you own. It doesn't matter if you own stocks or you own Turkish currency, Argentine currency, gold, or real estate. Everything is pretty much going down in relative terms against Bitcoin. And one of the big frustrating things, again, when it comes to volatility, like you said so well earlier, is that people look at Bitcoin and think, oh, it's volatile, blah, 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 blah. It's a bubble, whatever. And then it crashes and think, oh, it's dead. It's like, well, what if Bitcoin is not skyrocketing in value, then crashing? What if instead it's the US dollar that's volatile? I mean, think about this dramatic rise in interest rates. What if over the last year, Bitcoin has not collapsed in price against the US dollar 70%? What if the US dollar has actually rallied against Bitcoin 300%? What if we're not in the middle of a Bitcoin crash? We're in the middle of a dollar's parabolic spike upwards. And so, and both these things can be true at the same time. I know Bitcoin's crashed, obviously. So, but it's just that mindset change that we don't even think about because we're so used to thinking about that a US dollar equals value when it doesn't, and it never has. So.
Yeah, I think for people that would hear that, like, I completely agree with what you just said. But I think for Wall Streeters, if they were going to battle back, they'd be like, well, Bitcoin is such a small market cap compared to, like, if you took all the world's fiat currencies, that That's why it's bumping around at such a volatility. And there's some truth to that too, right? But I think as we get further along on the timeline, and your opinion, my opinion is that Bitcoin is going to continue to rip in dollar or whatever fiat terms you got, if you got a long enough time horizon. As those market caps of these fiat currencies to Bitcoin start to reach a parity, it's going to demonstrate exactly what you said. Is you're going to see that maybe it's the fiat currencies that are the ones that are moving in such dramatic fashion, because you're kind of reaching similar buying power between the two networks, the two monetary networks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And one more word on diversification I really would like to add here. I know we're about to end, but one more thing I'd like to add is that this isn't some speculation of something that could happen. This is already happening. This chart that I've had up here for a minute is the US dollar against Bitcoin in logarithmic terms, again, because you can only think about technology in logarithmic terms. What we see here are clear lower lows and lower highs of the US dollar against Bitcoin for over a decade. This is nothing new. It's not just started. It's only getting faster. And it's not just the US dollar, it's also assets, again, talking about diversification. Political currency units, again, the dollar, have been trending to zero against Bitcoin for over a decade. Rent and housing has been going down. And this is one of the things, again, you'll go back to one of my favorites, Jeff Booth, is, we think deflation's bad. We think prices going down is bad. When in reality, it's good. It's good when rent goes down. It's good when food prices go down, because prosperity is becoming more affordable. For the first time since we have a fixed immutable ledger, we can have the productivity gains of society flow back into the global monetary stock instead of being debased, inflated away, and a breaking of physics and corruption of the ledger. So this is a good thing. This being one of those main examples that rent and housing is continuing to go down. And so likewise, Tesla stock has had a great decade, but it's still down against Bitcoin because it's a more open system. Gold's going down and stock indices are going down. It doesn't matter if you have the NASDAQ or Dow or S&P 500, your mutual funds, whatever. And probably I say in the slide here that they're going to zero. I probably shouldn't have said that. I probably should have said they're trending towards zero. In the same way that oxygen never quite hits zero, it gets motor lease. So these things will probably never quite hit zero, but they'll continue to have 80, 90% declines, continually forever. It doesn't matter what you own. This is one of my favorite charts to get the point across.
Before you go to this last one, I think it's really important for people to know that it's not like you're saying that the value of Apple or Google or any of these companies is zero. You're just saying that in a world that has been conditioned to think that dollars and euros and yen are valuable, and that they're this valuation in today's terms, when you move to this exponential, event where things are going to be valued in this monetary energy, the valuation is way different to what you think the value of, call it, one Bitcoin is today. And it's so drastic that it makes it look like it's trending to zero, but it'll never get there for a lot of equities that continue to produce tangible value to society and have products and services that people actually want to use, right? Like, that's not going away. It's just it's a little hard for people to wrap their head around if they haven't put a lot of deep thought into what some of that actually means. But go back to your slide there. I want you to show that last one for people to see.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching my content and being a supporter of mine. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun for me to do, and it's really meaningful to know that so many people are enjoying my content and learning about Bitcoin. I think it's so important for people to get off zero. In addition to getting off zero, it is really critical. It is really important that you also begin taking self-custody of your sats and of your Bitcoin. This is because if you have Bitcoin on an exchange or you don't have proper self-custody, this is going to be a massive problem for you in the future, most likely. If Bitcoin starts having rapid periods of appreciation and there are rapid spikes in demand for Bitcoin education, and for Bitcoin advocates and advisors, it's going to be increasingly important that you have self-custody of those coins. So my message to you is please consider getting that self-custody. Now, you can do that on your own. There are plenty of free tutorials online. There's plenty of great work like that. But if you want somebody to help you with self-custody, if you want somebody to help you take cold storage of your Bitcoin, of your Satoshis, if you want somebody to help you set up a multi-sig vault, to set up an estate plan, to set up a plan for you as a person, an individual, as a business owner, as a charity, whatever the case. I work at the Bitcoin Advisor, and I'm happy to say that I really enjoy it. I love working with my clients. My job is literally to help people buy Bitcoin and secure it properly for years, decades, and generations to come. So if you want to learn about my services at the Bitcoin Advisor and what we do, you should click the link in the description. Here you can read a bit about what I do. You can book a free consultation with me. You can book a free meeting with me. I'll send you lots of free complimentary paperwork explaining how multi-sig vaults work, cold storage, giving you all the education you need. Everything's fully open source. What we do, our main goal is education, helping get coins off exchanges, and people be able to not lose sleep at night when they buy and secure their Bitcoin. So you can feel free to book a meeting with me. The first one is free and complimentary, just to figure out what your priorities are and get that adjusted. But if that's something that could be used to you, I really highly encourage you to take self-custody, whether that's with me or not. Please just do it. But for the many of you that probably will eventually want a multi-sig collaborative custody vault, the Bitcoin Advisor could be the place to go. And so click the link in the description, check that out. Really appreciate your time. For those that don't know, Hal Finney was one of the first Bitcoin. Well, he was literally the first besides Satoshi. And back in 2009, 2 years before Bitcoin hit $1. Okay, so this is not just before Bitcoin's $1. It's 2 years before it's $1. Hal Finney basically had this thought experiment, and he basically predicted exactly what this chart here shows you. Total global wealth in terms of Bitcoin declining exponentially towards zero forever in relative terms to Bitcoin. That's basically what Hal Finney predicted. He said, if this happens, Bitcoin will get to $10 million, blah, blah, blah. It's more like 40 million adjusted for inflation, and it'll probably be 400 million in a decade or so. And that price adjustment just continues up forever. But the more important point, as you said here, is that relative wealth in terms of Bitcoin just declines forever. And so basically what we're looking at here is a likely future where, as technology makes everything more abundant, as we have an infinite amount of debt, an infinite amount of prosperity, and everything just trends towards infinity, the only finite system in humankind, its value will trend towards infinity. And often people say, well, what if you could just make another Bitcoin? And it's like, well, that's a whole nother conversation, but you can't. It's a system designed to prevent replications of itself, in the same way that the Mona Lisa is a piece of art that's designed to be unique in its design. If you copy the Mona Lisa, you only make a lesser version of the Mona Lisa. In the same way, with Bitcoin, you only make a lesser version. So I guess for the average person wondering, okay, what does this mean for me? Should I buy? What should I buy, or whatever? Basically, my view would be that if we invert this, instead of thinking of everything else declining in relative value against Bitcoin, if we inverse it and realize that Hal Finney was right all the way back in 2009, what we've seen with Bitcoin is its consumption of everything else. It went from 0 cents for years up to 6 cents. It skyrocketed $30, crashed 90% to $2, and skyrocketed and crashed and skyrocketed and crashed. And right now we're in a period where Bitcoin's price denominated in political currency units happens to be down again, in large cause because the value of those political currency units has been inflected upwards as the minister of those currency units, Jerome Powell, has made them more valuable. But basically, what are we looking at here? Well, I would strongly argue that what we're looking at here is a continued expansion of Bitcoin into the future. It'll continue its massive skyrocketing trend. It'll alternate between skyrocketing dramatically and crashing dramatically upwards forever. And it's going to be really hard to time. It's just I would just encourage the average person to get off zero, because if we think of this again from a physics perspective, and perhaps you have a closing comment on this, I think of Bitcoin as a monetary black hole of the human race. For the entirety of humanity, we have been dealing with planets, and we store wealth in planets and asteroids and stars and all these things. And you throw energy at one, you throw an asteroid at a planet, you destroy the planet and everything like that. And that's why currencies fail. You have an opposing nation apply brute force physical costs in the form of military or economic sanctions, and you try to destroy it. And so we've had this system of these sinking ships and these floating planets. And for the first time ever, we have designed something that is basically a singularity. And we look at it and we don't understand it because it doesn't behave like a planet. It's just this tiny little thing that nobody can see. It's this abstract concept. It doesn't make any sense to us. It's this little dark orb. And we look at it and we think, oh, whatever, that's just a bubble. It's just this thing that doesn't make any sense to me. Nobody understands it. Okay. But the problem that I would challenge the average person listening to is this: is what if that thing actually is a threat? To you? What if Bitcoin is not a get rich quick scheme or an opportunity? What if Bitcoin is not a symptom of the increasing speculation of an increasingly corrupted ledger, and the symptoms of that? What if Bitcoin is actually the solution, and it's doing exactly the opposite of what you would expect the world's lowest risk asset to do? And that's what I would argue. As absurd as that might sound, and perhaps even you disagree with me, but I would argue that Bitcoin's already the lowest risk asset on planet Earth. Because if we assume the future world is coming, and we hope that's coming, the only low risk asset in that world is having a share of the global monetary stock.
Mhm.
Why would you own a security in a company with cash flows? You have a CEO and scandals and cash flow market. Why would you own planets in a universe where there's a black hole that's expanding infinitely forever? It's like you can try to censor it, you can try to destroy it. China's tried to censor Bitcoin, and every time they censor it, they only make the network stronger. And that's why they've given up on censoring it. No matter how much mass you throw at the black hole, no matter how much attention or negativity you throw at Bitcoin, it just absorbs it and grows greater and greater in a volatile fashion. And so I genuinely believe that Bitcoin's going to absorb all monetary premium of assets and eventually become the global means of storing value for the human race. And this is a good thing. And I believe it's going to save millions of lives and be
it's going to
a
bring in
wonderful
global
thing.
cooperation. It's going to usher in an age of global cooperation. I completely agree with you, especially at this point in the timeline. Maybe if it was 30 years from now, there may be equity that could outperform or outpace what remains as far as what more monetary energy is going to be pumped into it. But where we're at right now, I'm with you 100%, Luke. Really appreciate your time coming on and all the slides that you put together. That if people were listening to this on audio, I'd highly encourage you to go back and see some of Luke's slides, because he put up some awesome charts for you to contemplate and look at.